Okay, today we're going to talk about the Form 35R, the inspection response. I do have it pulled up for the Zoom if anybody wants to reference it. In person, we have it printed. All right, we'll be talking about today the purpose of the form, the strategy for putting in an inspection response, how to word responses in a manner that create the obligation. We'll be talking about negotiations, how to ask for additional inspections and when to do that, and how to make sure you are not waiving your inspection contingency. All right, so the purpose of this form is to ask for repairs or concessions in lieu of repairs. It's an opportunity for you to negotiate these items to create clarity with the obligations between your buyer and your seller. When using the Form 35R, we need to be able to create these and do so with competence. So that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, is how to word these in a way that creates a clear, objective, and consequence. So are we creating these responses in a way that asks for an action, or are we simply just listing problems? We'll be diving into this and doing a few samples while we're here. So for reference of the form, I'm pulling up the 35R. Basics of the form obviously are to reference the agreement date, buyer, seller, and the address. Make sure that what you have on the top is in fact the contract that you are referencing. And below, I wanted to talk about first the notice of additional inspections. You do have the options of approving the inspection, disapproving the inspection and terminating, asking for additional inspections, or just asking for the repairs right up front. So first, we'll dive into the notice of additional inspections. This is done if the inspector writes in their inspection report, additional inspections required by licensed plumber, licensed roofer, whatever is outside their own scope, to request that. When we put in the request, we not only check the box, but we have to also attach that inspector's request for those inspections. And in order to do that without waiving our inspection contingency, we want to make sure that we're not including any parts of the inspection other than just that request. So I thought I'd really quickly show you how to do that in Authentisign. Once you're in Authentisign, you can drag and drop your report. Once the report is up into your document section, you can select the report, and what it does is it pulls the entire thing down on the page next to it. Okay. Then you hit the select button and you remove all the pages except the one page you want to send over with the 35R. Once you've selected all the pages to delete, there's a button that says delete pages. Click that button and hit save.
Will that always be one page?
Yeah, what if the page has other things on there that?
Yep, we're getting there. So here's the page I chose to select. It's a page that has all the, I just gave this as an example. This is a list of problems. Okay, this is what you do not want to send across, because the objective is not to list the problems, but just to get more inspections at this point. So we want to find the verbiage from the inspector, which I'm sorry for my example is not the greatest because I didn't have an inspection report that asked for additional inspections. You should not be sending over something that looks like this. This is the no. So keep all the list of problems away from this part. Pull up the page of the report. So I just took the report summary and I'm using this part of the sentence that says require further evaluation and correction by qualified professionals. Okay, I'm going to pretend that says additional inspections because I don't have anything else to exemplify this. You can actually use your highlight markup, highlight all of the things except the sentence that says additional inspections required. once you have highlighted. So I highlighted the entire page. I kept the inspector's name at the top of the page and the bottom of the page. I also just kept the report summary up there, but I took out everything else. And then you can go over here to opacity and click 1. That changes everything on the page, so you can't see anything through it.
So we get to redact, like we're in the CIA or something.
Yes, we are redacting information that is unnecessary. You can change the color to anything you want. You can change it to gray, black, red, blue. I figured yellow was not aggressive, so yellow was a happy color. I'm keeping it.
Yellow, they're like.
Yellow is a non-aggressive color, so I just kept it as this. If you really want to redact it in black, feel free to do that. Yes, you can, although I would not do white, because then it looks like you just typed up a little sentence on a blank piece of paper. So do everything you can to show that this is truly the inspector's response, okay? Once you have sent that over, make sure it is attached to the 35R. If you have chosen additional inspection. If you are done with your additional inspections and you're ready to now send your request for repairs over, feel free to use a new 35R. So you can use the box in the top again. You can do that.
So, can I ask a quick question? Is there, I've never actually had an inspection that this was just kind of needed to me, but can you if say, it's because I've had the situation too, where an inspector doesn't he doesn't take the toilet out and do the whole sewer scope. Can you request that they put something like this verbiage in the report? So that they have more time to do.
So you want to ask,
Make sense.
are you asking if
Like,
you can ask the
inspector
inspector to say that additional inspections are needed? If there's something that's concerning to you that the inspector can't answer, then yes, they can definitely do that. And you can ask them to put the verbiage in there. In fact, you can also ask them to put it on a separate piece of paper at the end of the report that says additional inspections recommended for the following, you know, these contractors. All you want to make sure you're doing is not listing out all the problems.
Right.
Also in this, I don't have a slide for this, but this is just a kind of a side note to keep in mind. If you ask for additional inspections and at the same time make note of any repairs you want done, you have negated your additional inspections.
Can you say that again?
You don't get to have both. So if you want additional inspections, but say your buyer knows, I already know I'm going to ask for this and this, right? Do not put any requests for repairs.
Oh, for the next one.
If you are asking for additional inspections.
Just wait till after.
Wait until after, yes,
Mm.
because by putting both responses in there, you actually negate and take away your opportunity for your additional inspections.
If you're still within the initial inspection period, can you do additional inspections without filling out the form?
Yes, because the change in the form allows us now to bring in plumbers, electricians, everything you need. So this whole idea of additional inspections is kind of becoming a little bit of a thing of the past.
It just buys you more time.
Yeah,
Get somebody in.
exactly. It just buys you more time, but it's been opened up. So every licensed professional can come in during that initial inspection period.
How much additional time does it give you?
It's in a boilerplate language, or if you change the number, but typically it's 5 days. Okay,
By business days.
yes.
Yeah.
The defining the words. This is like the meat and potatoes of this form right here. When you say the word shall, it means that they are obligated to or have to do it. If you say the word may, it is a choice, either to or not to do. So properly drafting a response. You will want to make sure you cover who is obligated to do the initial work, Who will be responsible for paying for this work? What work needs to be done? And who will be doing it? The 35R actually gives the consequences for those not being met. So unless you're writing something on a 34, you don't necessarily need to say by X number of days before closing, or you know, you don't really necessarily need to make any other notes if you're using the 35R to ask for those repairs. So as an example to this, we'll practice by writing up a roof replacement. So pretend you have your 35R, your buyer's gonna ask for the seller to replace the roof.
Can you go back to the previous one?
I'm gonna leave it at this slide. While you just write up a little sentence that covers these things and ask the seller to replace the roof.
Are we asking for money or not?
You're asking for a roof replacement. I lost my keyboard. Okay. So we're just taking a minute, everybody online, to draft up a response to an inspection asking for a roof replacement. Oops, sorry. Okay. Check out your own sentences. I won't put anybody on the spot. Does it cover who's doing the work? Does it cover who's?
Sure.
So does it cover whose obligation it is to initiate work? Does it cover who is responsible for paying? What's being done and who's going to do it? I've written up a couple examples of acceptable ways to word this.
Yeah.
One, seller shall, that's who, at seller's expense, who's paying, hire ABC contractor to replace the roof, see attached bid. Seller shall hire ABC contractor to complete attached bid for roof replacement at seller's expense. Seller shall at seller's expense hire a licensed roofer to replace the roof with all new materials and replace flashing. I just put those extra things in there. If you don't have a bid to attach to this, it's better to be more specific, or you might just get free tab over top of free tab.
Do you need to be specific on the type of product that you want to use?
If you have somebody that requires so much specification on that, then you'll want to just get a bid and just say completely attached bid. But yeah, if there's nothing that you're specifying.
It's a comparable product.
Yeah.
Is it best to like get a contractor first, you know, like for the fighter chooses the contractor?
If
get
you
the bid?
have something that you really want done specifically, like not just a Band-Aid situation, but if you have something that you want done specifically, it is best if you can be as specific as possible. And that includes if you have a bid. Let's see, on the chat, seller agrees to replace roof. If shed or shop are included by licensed, bonded, insured professional per attached bid at no additional cost to buyers, seller agrees to provide paid receipt prior to closing. Excellent. Perfect. So,
And where would you write this on the line? Like, you put it here before you send that
yeah,
back?
in the repair requested.
Or does a
space.
34 if you need more space?
If you need more space, you can attach a 34. However, you might want to write in this blank space,
C30.
see attached. I would label it. I would label it exhibit B. Or something that connects that form 34 to this inspection response, because if you don't agree to it on the inspection response, it doesn't carry through with this contingency. It's a separate agreed thing. Remember back at the sales meeting when the question was the contingency had expired? How do you negotiate a repair after the contingency? It's just done in a completely different way with a completely different obligation and gives seller and buyer rights to terminate if it's not done with this.
So you're
So
saying
just
34
keep it
doesn't
together with the
carry
form
over.
30, yeah, keep it with the 35R. In any way you need to do that. I've had people do like a blank sheet of paper in a Word document, but it's still part of this document. Whatever you do not say, the roof needs to be replaced. Or the seller shall replace roof as recommended, but by a contractor, because the roof needs to be replaced does not create an obligation for anybody to do this. Putting it in the hands of a different contractor who you have not spoken to also leaves it up for interpretation. Maybe that contractor says, it doesn't need to be replaced. You know. All right. So let's talk about the response times. Once the buyer has given the response in paragraph 1, if those responses are basically if they ask for, the only response time is going to be triggered if they ask for repairs. So buyer asks for repairs in paragraph 1. During the time that the buyer sends those repair requests to the seller, the buyer can't change anything. They can't rescind anything. They have to give the seller their 3 days to consider it and respond. Okay, so once you send it over, you have to wait. The same thing goes for the seller making their response. Paragraph 2, when the seller has their response for what the buyer has requested, if there is a response sent over, the seller has to get, the seller has to give the buyer their 3 days to consider. They can't intervene that, they can't interrupt it, they can't rescind it, they can't change anything. Now, real life is, we may be potentially talking to each other during this entire, this entire process. And that's okay, because yay for form changes, adding paragraph 3. There is another response opportunity. So paragraph 3 actually had an updated response of that third box. The buyer rejects seller's response, but offers the attached alternative proposal for a modification or repair. That is your last ditch effort, last chance negotiation before the end of the contingency period. Once the timeline for the contingency ends, you are stuck with whatever the last negotiated or the last agreed upon, option was.
That's probably something we want to agree on before you actually submit this.
I have seen it work the best that way. I really have, because there's not a lot of time in this last paragraph. You really don't have a lot of time. You have your 3 days or whatever the response time is left. It's usually not much. So this is the nitty-gritty time that agents are usually on the phone to each other saying, okay, how can we make this work? What's the one last thing we can agree on that we can make this work with?
I'm kind of confused on that last paragraph. This part, buyer acknowledges that the inspection contingency will be waived unless buyer and seller reach an agreement.
Yes. So the term waived for this contingency is when it expires.
So if you don't come to an agreement, the entire inspection thing is just, if you guys never agreed on any repairs or anything like that, the entire inspection is just waived and you move forward?
Yes.
Gross.
Yeah. So, yes, I mean, you either satisfy this contingency or it's waived.
So like Russ
So-
was saying, you send over, if you're checking the third box on the third thing, you send over, you already agree on all the alternatives before you check it and send it with the other seller.
You could give them a chance, say, hey, this is the buyer's last, this is our last request, take it or leave it, seller. Seller looks at it, says, I don't really want to. Buyer, you still have a chance to terminate because you're still within the contingency
Yeah.
timeline.
So you still get your buyer a chance to be like.
You still have the right of your contingency, but just keep in mind, all this paragraph says is if you don't come to an agreement, it's just like this paragraph never existed. If you don't come to an agreement and you don't terminate, then you're moving forward. So it's, nothing has really changed other than this third opportunity to have another round of negotiation.
And this didn't use to exist.
It didn't, what's the deal?
March
2021, yeah, 2021. That's why it throws me every now and then. Because we always did this. We always came back and tried to make it work out, even without this provision here. Now they've added the provision so you can attach whatever form you decide to attach. There's no space for that. Okay. So I like to, go ahead.
One question on that last one. So if you're towards the end of your contingency period and you click the third box.
Mhm.
Saying that, and you've already agreed to it in principle, everybody's talked about it, everybody's fine with it. So you submit it with the third one checked. Seller decides, no, we thought about it and we'd rather not give you what you've asked for.
At that point, it benefits the senior.
And at that point, the contingent period has lapsed.
Well, as your buyer, you don't want to let the contingency lapse because it's
So
going
what
to
is the
move
time
forward
frame?
with
Right?
no work being promised.
Yeah.
Since you have not agreed on work, no work will be, no obligations been set. Because you have to.
Okay,
So you
agree.
could be down to the deadline
Absolutely.
and you click this thinking that they're gonna accept it. And then
I would just say, look,
maybe it's like 8:30 at night or something like that, you submit it at 9 o'clock. Contingency is waived, they haven't made the decision yet, they could
Yeah,
stay.
so exactly, exactly. Don't do that to yourself.
Right.
Don't put yourself in that tight situation, but it's like this paragraph never existed because it would have been the same situation had this paragraph not existed. You know, if you still can't come to an agreement on repairs and your deadline is coming up, it's the same exact consequence.
So if your sellers, they haven't signed paragraph 2. Then. Like. What Russ was saying, like
So-
putting that in there.
Not signing is a rejection. Right. Okay, so
So they're just not gonna do anything,
if,
and then,
if they don't respond in their 3 days,
right,
that is a no.
so then if your
Seller waits
buyer.
3 days to respond, doesn't respond, that third day is the seller's no answer.
Okay, and then the buyer respond and say, okay, we in
Absolutely,
that third paragraph,
yes,
okay.
So you're saying.
because no response is a no.
Seller rejects all requests by buyer, so now you're stuck in paragraph 3, and that's where you go back to your buyers and say, hey, we have these options, basically, you can continue to move forward and agree with their rejections. You
Yes.
can back out, or we can send in a third option, but they can still at that point not accept the third option, and at that point, your entire inspection is waived.
Try not to overthink this paragraph, because I think that it seems a little more complicated than it actually is. All it's saying is that we're giving you a third opportunity to negotiate within your timeline, and here's how you can attach whatever you agree on later. Before this existed, we would just have to attach it back to this, or somehow re-reference it back to here. They're just trying to make it easier. And as far as your timelines go, if you use a TC, you're gonna have those timelines reminded to you every day. So it's just gonna be a matter of keeping up with your timing.
So in inspection addendum form 35, it says seller's response to request for repairs and modifications, seller shall have 3 days.
Yes,
Does that not come into play? And
they get 3 days for paragraph
this one,
2.
nothing.
Yes. And then you need to keep in mind when they reject, the buyer also gets an opportunity to respond to their rejection. So if they do not respond in their 3 days, that is a no. And you can play it out as if they had just rejected, and then let the buyer take their last 3 days to decide if they want to try to work something out or it out, or just move forward.
And there's not another 3 days for the seller, but it's just.
There's no more 3 days after paragraph 3. That's the end.
So it's 9 days total, basically, because buyer submits the inspection request, seller then gets their 3 days to decide it.
We can talk about timelines at the end, I think, because I don't want to spend too much more Zoom time doing that, but yes, we'll talk about, we'll calculate it at the end here.
It's just.
Yeah. Refocusing back here,
One page
okay?
that have multiple back and forths are the ones that confuse me, is like, again, it's one form, but we start and fill it out here, and then I give it to you, and then you fill out the middle,
Yes,
and you give it back to
so-
me, and then I'm like.
So a great point was made on Zoom, or on the Zoom chat. It says, in addition to, this is a good time to ask the sellers to cooperate with any warranty transfers. So if there are things that come up like windows or appliances, furnaces, that kind of thing. Anything that might have a warranty may help with some of these negotiations. Excellent point. Let's look at a question that might hit us in real life. Okay, a buyer delivers the 35R with the box checked for additional inspections. The inspector's recommendation is not attached. Are the 5 days for the additional inspections awarded to the buyer? And does the seller have to honor the additional inspections? You can reference your paper if you need to. So the answer is no. Buyer did not deliver the additional inspection notice properly. So with no recommendation from an inspector attached, the additional inspection provision is not applicable. Not awarded, the seller does not have to honor the additional inspection. If you are asking for additional inspections, make sure your inspection report does say additional inspections recommended.
How would the seller respond to that in that situation? Would they just not respond?
By coming back saying this is an improper delivery of your additional inspections.
Would you hope that in that case, the agent would call you and be like, hey,
Yeah, you would hope.
like, you did this,
Or-
I'm assuming you meant to do this.
You forgot to attach it, I don't see.
Hope it's not a stretch.
Or we're still within that time.
I
frame,
didn't
so
like that.
With the proper.
Yeah, I mean, in the interest of.
Well, let me get back to them. That wasn't a scenario I looked at. Okay, question 2, termination. How do you terminate based on a 35R? And what if there's earnest money at escrow? What if there's no earnest money at escrow?
Has there ever been a deal with no earnest money in it?
Yes, because sometimes the inspection comes through on day 2. And they look at it and say, oh my gosh, the foundation's cracked, I'm out.
I see, they
And
just haven't
that's before
submitted
they
it.
delivered it to escrow. So I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page
I
with how to proceed if you need to terminate.
Buyer's inspection of the property is.
So-
approved. Are you talking about?
So 35R, if you are terminating from
Yeah.
35R, you need to disapprove it by the correct box.
Yeah.
But also, if there's earnest money being held at escrow, you need to officially make the demand for the earnest money
Before.
at the same time. And that is with a Form 50.
So sending this with that box checked.
Mhm.
with the form.
Form 50.
And this is being on the seller's side.
This is a buyer, if your buyer's terminating, because your buyer is the one that has the right to
But
terminate
if
with
they
the
never
inspection.
submitted their earnest money, why would they need to request?
So this is a 2-part question. This is a 2-part question. The first part was with the earnest money, and if there is earnest money, you need to submit the Form 50. And as a slight tangent, the day that you submit the Form 50 starts a clock running with escrow, where the earnest money has to be claimed and dispersed or sent to arbitration. So you want to sign that Form 50 and you want to make that demand as soon as you terminate this contract, okay? If it gets delivered to escrow and the agent at the same time, just so escrow has notice, and if there's no earnest money being held, there's no need for a Form 50.
So what about on the seller side then? Say,
The seller doesn't have the right to terminate.
I just mean like, say the buyer hasn't submitted earnest money yet. And for some reason. Buyer backs out, but it's not for valid reasons, so seller gets earnest money, but buyer still hasn't submitted earnest money. To
Yeah.
escrow, do you submit the 50?
I would also,
As a seller?
I can also address that too afterwards,
Okay.
but because it's not with the 35R, which
Okay.
is kind of where we were trying to stay, but yes, there are things that you can do for that.
So I've heard
Um,
things like that where they're like, buyer
yeah.
never even got the money,
There's
terminated,
Yeah.
and now seller's trying to get their earnest money.
Absolutely. Okay, one more question, because I really like these questions. It promotes these conversations. Okay, additional inspections. What are the consequences if the buyer sends over a 35R notifying for additional inspections and a list of repairs requested?
You
It
waive,
was waived.
yeah.
Kind of accidentally answered that.
Wait,
We just talked about it. Everybody gets that one right. By delivering the notice and asking for additional inspections, it unintentionally triggered the 3-day response, not the 5-day.
You can only check one box at a time, basically.
Yes. So this is a real life situation that actually happened. Most of these situations happened to me. So an agent did check the box for additional inspections. Attached the recommendation. And listed the repairs requested. And at that point, I contacted the legal hotline. And what they had actually done is triggered the inspection response from the seller. They just gave their request for the repairs, which triggered the 3-day response. Did not trigger the 5-day inspection extent or the additional inspections.
So how did you break it to that agent?
I responded on paragraph 2 with the acceptance of doing those repairs. And that satisfied this contingency and moved us on.
Yes, really crappy to do that buyer's agent, you're like, so.
The thing is,
I'll be giving you 20 grand my commission check because.
you don't get any.
Okay, does
We're
anybody
gonna
else
have
have any
all the
other sort of situations that have come up with inspections, contingencies, responses? I touched really quickly in the meeting about. I lost my train of thought there. What does and doesn't constitute a waiver of the inspection? Essentially, what it is we're not going to deliver a list of repairs. Ever, unless they ask for it. What we are gonna do is we're going to keep things consistent with the things we're asking for. Because the gray area comes up when new information is brought to a seller that has nothing to do with the information provided in the first place. I'm gonna skip through this. I might have, no, that was the end of it. Okay. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody. But we get ourselves into trouble by attaching things that have nothing to do with the rest of the inspection. We can keep things, you know, we can keep following the rules if we attach things like a bid, or we, you know, potentially like if you list a few things that are wrong with the roof and say, I want money for the roof, or, you know, you can, that's a really, really gray area. If you're dealing with a lender, these responses are not confidential to the lender. So they don't, you can't just sweep these under the rug. The lender's going to see the 35R. If you want to get away from triggering things with a lender, you're probably going to right off the bat want to start with a cash concession in lieu of repairs. You know,
Say that again. Why
want
would
to keep
they?
it clean. So if you want to keep it clean and
Right.
easy, and you're trying to deal with a lender, don't want to cause any red flags, you may want to just come to the table with asking for money rather than a list of repairs.
Because if the lender sees that, they're gonna have some second guessing about.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
Right, yeah.
To be replaced.
Well, windows.
Some of your may think roof needs to be replaced because it has 5 or 7 years left on it. Lender has a different requirement for what they consider the roof needing to be
Right,
replaced,
yeah.
maybe 2 to 3 years, I forget what it is.
Yeah,
But that unnecessarily triggers the lender.
right.
So if
avoid it
you want to
possible.
avoid that, yeah, it is best if you could just do it money, like do
I
with
mean,
money.
isn't that kind of the best anyways?
It is the
Yeah.
best.
Typically in the buyer situation, then you don't get fixed, cheap, quick fixes. for
Yeah,
them.
and you have more control. That was kind of my,
Yeah, because unless you are being very specific with the things that you're asking for, like attaching a bid, you're gonna get whatever they decide you're gonna get.
like whomever, more,
Yeah.
By, unless you specify by whoever they choose.
When you ask for money, you do not have to submit a bid.
No.
You can just ask for it only if they rebuttal
Right.
back saying why.
Now, sometimes the seller is gonna ask for a copy of the inspection. And,
please, I mean.
say they sign consent, right? Say they sign consent for the copy of the inspection with either checking the box or the 35Z. If they sign the consent for that, sometimes they may want to see it.
Buyer doesn't have to get it.
They don't have to, no, and there may be a situation where the buyer might not want to. If, say, roof is 7 years old or has 7 years left on it. Inspector doesn't necessarily call that out, but buyer sees it as a concern. You know, sometimes sellers want to look for justification for this price. And at the same time, a buyer may just be thinking 5-10 years down the road, I'm gonna have to deal with this, let's ask for it right now.
Yeah.
So there are situations where you may not have somebody willingly give up the inspection report.
So which box do they negotiate just a change in price on this form?
They're gonna go paragraph 1,
Mhm.
and then they're going to say, box. What line number is that? 11. The modifications or repairs.
The last box.
And when you word that, you also want to word it with the words, you know,
Seller shall
seller shall credit buyer
X amount.
such and such amount of money towards,
And usually attach.
figure out where that's gonna go. Is it gonna go down off the purchase price? Is it gonna go towards the closing cost? You need to specify because these instructions will go to escrow and will go to the lender.
Should you attach a bid to that too?
No.
Like how much this should cost?
Only if the
No.
seller requests it.
No, you don't need to attach a bid if you're asking for money.
Just to say like that's how much this would be.
You don't have to.
Okay.
If you're just asking for a cash concession,
How do you come up with the amount?
you can tell them. You can definitely tell that seller, hey, the roof's gonna cost 30 grand, we're gonna be asking for 30 grand. You
It was
know,
just, it was just taught to me like best practices to always, if you're asking for any money, have something to reference, so you're not seeming like you're just pulling that figure out of thin air.
you can, but you don't have to, and the place that I go when I think about that is. Whatever you attach to that does also go to the lender, so if you're trying to keep it really clean, like, let's just write the price.
Right, yeah.
Or you can not even do it on there. You could, if it's just the price, you can sign a 34 and say, seller shall credit buyer, I don't know how much money, some sort of money
Right,
for its closing costs. Have them sign that. Once they sign that, check off the 35R as satisfactory and move to closing. The copy of the 35R that goes to the lender is clean. It says we're good to go. The lender also gets a copy of the concessions on a separate addendum,
right,
as now I have seen they've been asking.
right.
I don't know if this is a new thing that's been happening, but the lenders have been asking lately for people to send over separate addendums with all of the concessions in one page. So that's another way to avoid it.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Just thinking strategically.
Yeah, I had never, it was never brought up that other side that the lender gets to see that.
Right, well, that's how I always been taught.
So to avoid the lender fraud, they see everything. I mean, every piece of paper that comes through there could go to underwriting and could go to the lender. And we want to not be part and party of potential lender fraud. So, you know, we don't want to try to hide things from them, but at the same time, if it's just money we're negotiating, there's no repair requests. So it is possible to have a separate addendum with the concessions on them
So
and then sign off on the 35R.
in that case, as I like that, So what is your,
what is your wording?
like, on paragraph 1, which box would you check? Like, if you just wanted to do the whole 34.
Okay, so I would have them sign the 34 first, right? You wanna make sure they sign this 34 with the men, right? Cause
In
that's
that-
what you're
In
doing.
that 3-day period that you have, your.
You want them to sign the 34 before your inspection contingency ends.
Right.
Because you wouldn't be triggering that. If they don't, feel free to put it on here, trigger that 3 days. What I'm saying is that's an option, but that option ends when your contingency ends. So you have to get that taken care of before your
So we have
inspection
a 35
contingency is
card,
over.
they've signed it, we just check box 1. We are.
And you attach the 34.
Is approved.
No, you don't need to attach the 34. It's not part of the
Okay.
negotiation for the inspection.
It's just
It is
finishing.
That
the
for an
inspection.
addendum.
Okay.
Exactly.
So
It's
that-
just kind of
By
ending
checking that,
it.
we're saying we're done, we're watching
We're washing our hands of the 35 off. You can't do it, you need to do something else. Yes. Okay.